I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies.
Welcome to Cookies, the world's most influential basketball podcast. It is a gorgeous spring day here in New York City. There's something different. It could be that the Knicks are a championship contender. What an exciting time to be here in the city of dreams, Hollywood, birthplace of rock and roll. Andrew Kuo, what's going on, man?
Fucking, it's incredible. You know how we always say New York City's a better place when the Knicks win? Well, it sure is, man. And like, woo, the vibes in the city are crazy. You can walk into a deli, we're talking Knicks. We're not talking about the Nets sweep. They're just like, bing bong, baby, triple B.
Yeah, you walk down the street and it's a sea of orange and blue on the train. Jerseys from legends such as John Starks and Ewing and another Starks and another Ewing and then two Oakleys and a Ewing and a Starks.
Yeah, that's Spreewell hanging out next to the owner. It is crazy. I mean, we could talk some deep dive Knicks in a minute, but like when you walk around New York City, it's always notable to see what jerseys are being worn, right? And like Ewing still has a death grip on this island.
I disagree.
What you got?
I think Starks has become the official like old head player to wear. Spree, uptick in Spree for sure. You see some Bernard Kings, some Fraziers, but they're not in the same category.
Right.
You'll see some Oakleys, Masons. To me, I think Starks has surpassed Ewing. Maybe it's just because Starks is still around with the organization, so you see him a lot at games.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's just that guards are more notable, or the fact that he did the dunk. Like my little nephew sees the dunk on the Jumbotron and freaks out.
Yeah, it's incredible. Incredible.
It's the dunk. It's the dunk. It's the dunk.
Yeah. Yeah, man.
So I think Starks has become the patron saint, which is funny because he was like John Starks.
And famously, maybe his performance affected the results of a championship game, a game 7. His poor shooting, but he did nothing wrong. He just missed shots. I used to think, okay, there's a fine line. I used to think some basketball jerseys are the most swagless thing you can possibly wear. But as a fan of wearing basketball jerseys, I think there's a fine line. Like if I rolled up to Ladiv in an Alexei Shved jersey, you'd be like, damn, what the fuck, bro? Like, where'd you get it? How'd you find it? I was like, psh, it's my business. But if I rolled up in like a Walt Frazier throwback, you'd be like, we gotta leave, man. We can't be seen here.
Quo is wilding. He showed up in that Willis Reed.
Right, but if I used to think Spreewell was a good one, just because, like, you know, he was known as the guy who choked out PJ Carlesimo in a practice in Golden State. The Knicks got him. It's kind of like emblematic of the direction the NBA was taking, and you know, this is a family show and all this stuff. So he was kind of edgy for a while, but not so much anymore. So when I see Spreewell jerseys in the wild, I'm just like, might as well be Willis Reed over here.
I still have a soft spot for the Spree jersey.
He's the best.
For the reasons you said. But I will say, yeah, it has become more normalized and less like, oh shit, a Spree jersey. Just because of the passage of time, and because if you look at the legacy of Knicks players out of the last 20 years, you know, it's Melo, Porzingis, Spree. People aren't really wearing Allen Houston jerseys. People aren't really wearing Marbury jerseys, which I think
Marbury is the one. Marbury, I would definitely wear.
But there just aren't that many stars, and Spree has just been elevated by the passage of time from being like edgelord jersey to just being like one of the more recent guys who was good.
Also, I got to bring this up because I want to talk about the PR of basketball players, vegetables, streetwear, all this stuff. But Sprewell, Starks, and Larry Johnson all like bent their knee to the Knicks organization, right? They brought them back in as ambassadors to the fans, ambassadors to the brand, all this stuff. And then because of that, they were highly visible during games. And even if you watch on TV, it's like New York Knicks legend John Starks in the crowd. I'm like, he's on the payroll. Like, he works for the Knicks now, for community outreach or something.
Yeah, Starks, Houston, Larry Johnson.
Well, Houston's
John
behind the
Wallace.
scenes, right? Like, he's not face forward.
Right. I just mean they all work for the organization. At least John Wallace did up until a couple of years ago. I don't know if
And
he still
oddly, when you walk the corridors when you walk past like the Lavo Meatballs, the Cantina Nachos from Avenue, one of the great restaurants and nightlife spots in New York, you're inundated with the jerseys of these guys. So like, it makes sense that you had a beer in you. The Knicks have an amazing victory in the playoffs. You're like copping that Sprewell jersey tonight.
It's funny, Waldy Zerbiak never played for the team, but because he's been the face of MSG, or the face of the Knicks broadcast on MSG, along with all these other guys like Walt Frazier, who are Knicks, for some reason I just kind of associate him with being a former player, but it's really just that he's like from Long Island or something, right?
Right. Dude, I think I was waiting for you outside in Midtown, my favorite part of town, one time, and Wally World walked by with like he was off to work with his suitcase on wheels, and he was hobbling in a way that shocked me. He was kind of like, he has many surgeries. I believe he had like a hip issue, a back issue. He had it all. He was a really athletic forward for the Wolves, and he kind of broke down in predictable ways. And he was walking down the street, and this was only a couple years ago, and he was walking like, what was that, Young Frankenstein, like walk this way, and they have that limp from side to side, up and down, and it made me think like the brutal nature of this. Like, if you talk to John Starks now, he'd be like, yeah, I can't really sit in that chair because like my knee will like fly out of place, and like we're running a risk there, so I can't really get into that cab, like it is wild what these guys go through.
I agree. And look, let's talk about basketball later, but before that I will say Wally Zerbiak, the king of Cold Springs.
I like how you dropped the mic but had to bring it back. It's like, no more basketball, but more about Wally Zerbiak.
Yeah, no, I know we got to save basketball for later. I know the city is awash in Knicks fever. We just got to hold off a little longer. But I will say I saw Zerbiak leaving the garden.
He did it again. All right,
I know I did. Carrying a plate with sushi on it, and he was eating it with chopsticks as he walked through the crowd to get into a car. And all I could think was respect.
Wait, was it a porcelain plate or was it like a paper plate?
It was a paper plate with sushi on it, but he was eating it with chopsticks as he walked. And people were like, Wally World.
Respect.
That's it. Respect.
Yeah.
No appropriation there.
Dude, okay, quick story. I was walking down the street with my family, and a woman stops next to us, and she just starts hurling these racial slurs at me. And whatever, kind of like normal-ish. I'm not shocked.
Anything good?
No, it was mostly directed at her. Like, why would she be with like an Asian man? My child's disgusting. Like, what am I doing in this country?
No, that's not good stuff.
No, and whatever. But the twist is, the person yelling at me looked Asian, and I was like, if people don't really know that, I think there's like an undercurrent, depending on what country you're from, but Chinese people in America kind of like hate each other a little bit in a very subtle and unique way. And I was like, yo, this is very complicated. And my wife was like, no, it wasn't good. I'm like, it's fine. It's kind of interesting, but it was weird. Anyway,
Was
talking
it
about cultural stuff.
Was it a man or a woman who was yelling at you?
It was a woman with Texas plates, clearly just like rolling through town, like maybe stuck around a couple weeks after the Trump stuff. But someone walking by us was like, "Oh my God, this city is still awful." And I'm like, "She's not from this city. It's clear she's not from this city." And then she drove away. It was Texas plates. I'm like, that makes kind of more sense.
That sounds like a bummer.
I'm voting. I'm Republican now. I've switched. The city's not safe.
I'm divorcing my wife.
That's right. Sorry, I'll be voting for whoever DeSantis asks representative from my community.
But I don't even think of you as like even a downtown guy anymore. You are, in my opinion, like now you're like the king of Uptown. You are.
That's what they've been saying.
Flow.
They've
for
been
years,
saying,
for years, you have fantasized about strolling the Upper East Side with flowing coats, a la our queen from the Undong.
Are you my busy friend?
I am.
Dude, beware.
Have you been up there recently?
I fucking love that part of town, man. I just love it. So it's one of my close friends' 40th birthday, and there had to be a move, right? We couldn't just go to a Christmas restaurant. It had to be something else. And I kind of dropped the ball. The week went by, and I'm like, oh, it's tomorrow. What the hell? Like, okay, all these things are off the plate. Like, Teresi. What other things? Like some Christmas restaurants, I have to admit. There was a request for like basically the major food group stuff. It's like, oh, Lobster Club, the Grill. Like are those places available? None, obviously none, within 24 hours. But you know what was? Mr. Chow's Uptown, Midtown on 57.
Yep.
And for people who don't know, which I was surprised to know as I was talking through this, that people, they were like, what's that restaurant? I'm like, oh, the food is terrible. And it's very expensive. Like, we are not going to be saving money there. And it's kind of like, for lack of a better word, like, not cool, right? And they were like, well, why are we going there? It's like, well, this is the one, like, historic New York place, like, from our history, right? Like, with the Factory, Warhol, Basquiat, like, this whole crew famously hung out there, Rene Ricard. And I was like, we have to go to the Midtown one because that's the one, the original, and there's a certain New York charm to it, but I don't think my eating companions understood.
I've only been to the Midtown one a couple times. One was with Q from World Star, rest in peace.
Oh, damn. Were you interviewing him?
Yeah. That was a fun story. That was back when magazines had budgets. So,
yeah, that's right. Did he choose the place? Because I have a thought on this after going.
He did, yeah. So,
yeah.
But he went down to Alexandria, Louisiana, and I went with him in a mission to spring Cat Stacks from federal detainment.
Oh, damn.
And we failed because they had the court date wrong.
Your Honor, like, this court date is Cap.
Yeah, her court date isn't for 2 months. That's Cap, Your Honor.
Of course, we're referring to the Young Thug trial, which is the most amazing thing happening in news today.
Approach the bench. The witness is capping.
You guys, behave yourself. This is a place of justice. My court will not accept such cap.
Let me remind you, you are under oath. You will not be capping today.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, went with Q down to Louisiana. Then we went out to LA, and we were like rolling around and going to like gentlemen's clubs and Phantom. Different time, man. Different era. I went to Greenhouse with him when he was having beef with 50 Cent, and 50 Cent's minions came up and tried to coax him into coming to the G Unit office.
Yeah, that's not a good idea if you're beefing with 50.
He didn't do it. He was also,
good for him. Yeah.
He was also Who Kid's cousin. Anyway, so Mr. Chow's, I went with Q one time, and then the other time I went was for a Bon Appetit story where I was interviewing Rick Ross about food. And it was...
Dude.
It was Gabe.
the homie. Yes.
It was Gabe.
That's a good time.
Gabe Stalley, who I actually played ball with. Mm-hmm. And he was on MMG at the time, and then also Gucci Pucci, who was managing that label, and Rick Ross. A lot of fun. Had a good time. Rick, there's some really funny quotes from Rick Ross if you looked that up on Bon Appetit's website. That was from like 10 years ago or something though. He
gives good quotes, and like this coincides with an observation I made that night. It was packed. It ended up being packed. People waiting for our table. It was a place where Steve Cohen was right next to us, the owner of the Mets, with Don Lemon and their families. And there was like kind of celebrities that I barely recognized because that whole world of reality shows like Housewives of New York, all that stuff, I don't really delve into, but they were there. It was like a spot. And my idea is the worst Chinese food is kind of more interesting than very good French food. Just to me, I'm Chinese, whatever. So I'd rather have like a Mr. Chow's Chinese dinner than like carbone. Like that's just my taste. And you know, we always say like, what's the signature dish of New York City? It's like, oh, it's chicken wings and pork fried rice, in my opinion. Because everybody on every corner, every subway, everyone's eating that thing. It's not like a hamburger or a hot dog. I never see anyone eating a hot dog on the subway, you know? And even pizza. It's the pork fried rice combo. And I half expected at dinner, I was like looking over my shoulder to see if like Josh Hart would walk in or like Jalen Brunson. I was just like, is this a Knicks hangout? Because this seems like, so the energy was amazing. It wasn't necessarily like notable in a New York Magazine way, but I was like, this room feels awesome. I had a really good time.
This sentiment that you are describing is echoed by Pete Wells' #1 restaurant in New York, and I believe in this listing it is listed from 1 to 100, and his #1 restaurant basically said the same thing that you're describing in some ways. This place called Tatiana by Kwame Onwachi. If I butchered that, sorry. It's literally the first time I've said this name. No, I mean, I don't know the spot. I haven't been to it.
Tatiana.
It's on the Upper West Side. Pete Wells' review, calling it the #1 restaurant in the city, was, we needed Tatiana. We needed a kitchen that puts Caribbean and African and Black American cooking, too often kept in the city's margins, right at center stage. And then he says,
this guy's a celebrity. This guy's a Top Chef celebrity. Yeah, I know his cooking on TV. Damn, we gotta go. This looks sick.
Yeah, it sounds fun. He said, we needed a party. We needed a reason to get dressed up, to drink rum cocktails with spicy food, to stay out past 9 o'clock, to look around a dining room and see a new, heterogeneous version of New York, and to feel hope for its future. Feels like a review he wrote a couple years ago, or at least contextually, because I doubt he's feeling that same quarantine idea right now. But when he wrote it, that was what it was. Have you seen the list of this top 100 restaurants?
No, it was paywalled, and I can't even afford a blue check, Ben. Let's be honest.
I think it was a good mix. I'm not going to go through it in depth, but it was a nice mix of places that he clearly really enjoyed. I'm talking about Pete Wells, which was like, here's a like Puerto Rican spot in the South Bronx where you eat from a truck, and the Queens Night Market, but it's right next to the grill. Like, I think it's very intentional in that way.
That's cool.
Of like the highs and lows, and I'm not meaning low in a negative way. I just mean more. So
it wasn't like 11 Madison #1. It wasn't a list like that.
No, I mean, it's got a place like Le Bernardine at 3 and Via Carota at 4, and then La Piranha Lechonera at 5, which is the South Bronx spot. And I feel like that's kind of the vibe, right? Le Bernardine, fine dining, classic, amazing place to go blow 3 racks. Via Carota, like a high-end neighborhood spot, and then a place where you're eating from a styrofoam carton. I think that was his vibe. So anyway, I thought it was an interesting list. There's definitely a lot of places that I have not been that I would like to.
Which one raised your eyebrows the most? What on the list?
I liked that Che Li was 8 as a restaurant that we had only been to recently for the first time and thought it was like really spectacular. So I was like, all right, I see what you're doing here, Pete.
Yeah, I mean, this is like a debate forever. Like when the best lists come out, it's always like the Christmas restaurants. But I don't know. Like, is Scars? I know with all like the baggage of that neighborhood, all the baggage of just trying to be like. But what about that's like one of the best restaurants in New York, right?
I felt like this was the vibe he was going. I mean, in some of these places, I don't know if they fit necessarily that description. Like, really? You know, like is Ernesto's really one of the best restaurants in New York?
Oh, that's the one
You know.
where they have like the prosciutto over the potato chips, right? It's like
Yeah.
the Hannibal Lecter appetizer.
Exactly. And maybe if you are Pete Wells and you're looking back at the last few years and some new places you've gone to and you're coming up with this list, you may have just not been to like 700 restaurants. You've gone to the ones mostly that you're reviewing because you
Yeah,
go
yeah.
back multiple times. So I think you're going to generally delve into places that you've been a little bit. But I don't know. I enjoyed the list. I thought it was interesting. I mean, he had Scars at 72.
Oh, that's awesome. That's cool. Ooh,
Yeah,
I'd have it top 30, but whatever.
Le Crocodile was at 79. Again, a good list. Definitely some places that I have not been to that I would check out.
We got to hit them off one by one.
But me, I'm just more into the fact that it's ramp season, son.
Okay, here we go. Go off, sire.
I feel like the
build-up
ramps
is
are not
amazing.
even something that I think is cool. It's not something that I even like love as an item. It's just now that they are significant as emergence from root vegetables.
Oh, wait.
When I
okay.
see ramps at a farmer's market, Union Square, or even like Williamsburg or Greenpoint, whatever, you're like, oh, okay. Fresh items are on the horizon. These apples that you're getting at the farmer's market, you know they're 4 months old. You know they're 5 months old.
At
It's
this
not like they
time of
got
year.
some new apples. They've been literally just sitting in crates
There's nothing
for
wrong
6
with that.
months. It's all good.
Yeah,
They're
yeah.
edible. They're
Delicious.
shelf stable, as my man Steve 1989 would say. If they're kept cold, apples will last for a really long time. But yeah, the farmer's market is. I don't go in the winter. Like, it's too grim. There's not enough good stuff there. But
You
so
don't like
when
those squashes. You don't like the freeze dried whatnot.
yeah, they're okay.
These vegetables are cap.
Your Honor, rutabaga is cap.
Yeah.
But yeah, the ramps, although being this like symbol of bougie, foodie loserdom, still I see them and I'm like, guys, ramps are here.
Is it the scarcity of it as well?
I think that's part of it. I think it's just the timing. But it's been kind of weird because this spring it's been nice anyway. It didn't seem like the ramps emerged out of the blue. It just sort of felt like spring. We had some hot days, and it's like, all right, you got ramps, but also you got asparagus, you got peas.
I'm down for asparagus for
There's
sure.
some. You got the first spring arrivals. Fava beans, big fan. Love a fava bean.
Hannibal Lecter ass again. Wow. I mean, oh, that was a count in fava beans. Yeah. I want to talk about vegetable PR, man. Like,
Been waiting for someone to talk about that.
I'm so annoyed. So obviously, growing up, Americans, I think famously George Bush, don't like vegetables. Like, ugh, eat your vegetables. Like, why? And it's such a specific American thing. And growing up, I thought, like, how come when we go to the supermarket, it's always celery, broccoli, the greatest hits tomatoes, which are fruit, carrots, which I hate. And like, it's like, of course I didn't like vegetables because these were the only options, like green peppers, not into those. But then when I go to the Chinese market, I'm like, what are those? What are those? Those are delicious. I've had those. Those are great. And like, I just think the PR is too strong with like something like broccoli, which I like. But when you say vegetables in America, you just think of that stuff, right? Like a side of vegetables like string beans and all that. But there's a whole world out there, man. Ramps, great name. Fiddleheads, also seasonal, also great. Poisonous, I think, if you don't eat them at the right time. Water spinach, watercress, like all this stuff is pretty exciting. So all I'm saying, like radishes are amazing. All I'm saying is like whoever's paying this PR team, like big celery, respect.
Well, yeah, you sound facetious, but it's probably true, right?
It for sure is marketing. Yes, yeah.
Or if it's not marketing, it's just having like a chokehold on the kind of vegetables that get presented in supermarket chains everywhere. Like, if you are making celery, you're out there growing celery, you're shipping celery, you have a huge celery operation, you will keep your foot on the neck of the vegetable industry.
Yep.
You're not letting. So I'm just thinking of like a low-level vegetable,
An underrated vegetable. A slumping gourd.
Yeah.
The gourd player.
You're not letting like chives walk through that door.
Oh my God. Perfect example, because in my house, chives were eaten kind of like in volume because they grow like weeds in the backyard. And like, yeah, hard to find if you're making some dumplings for a party.
Yeah, lavender. Like,
You eat lavender? I
I'm
love
just saying,
lavender.
lavender's like, stay the fuck out of New York.
Right. Well, like, how did Iceberg have a chokehold on America for 50 years? And it has to do with legislation. It has to do with farming, right? I mean, just with the Monsanto thing that we know about, it's like regulating the way seeds are traded and bought. Like, there is some kind of dark underbelly of the vegetable business.
No, I mean, there's no doubt about it, right?
Yeah,
If
yeah.
you have carrots and you've just been producing them in these obscene volumes to feed America, there's no way you're just going to relinquish it. You are tied into legislature. You are tied into like farm aid. You're tied into the like supply chain, whatever. And I think it's exactly what you're describing. And sometimes I'll go to Wegmans, which is of course a legendary Rochester institution now in New York City. They're opening one at Astor Place very soon. But you go in there and it's kind of exactly what you're describing. Like they always have carrots, they always have celery. You're like, so you guys just don't have tomatillos, huh? You don't have like these kind of peppers, but you always have those staples. You always have onions. They're never like out of onions. They're never out of apples. So
And to bring it back to
Yes.
ramps, I feel like there's a pickleball thing going on with ramps, where tennis, the lamest sport out, is like, you know what's really lame? Pickleball. Doesn't everyone hate play some tennis like a real athlete? And that's like the ramp vibe, because we all know ramps are pretty delicious. Like there's nothing offensive about ramps and pasta. Ramps just like sautéed. They're awesome. They're garlicky. They're kind of like very nice looking. They kind of flow like pasta themselves when you cook them. And the knock on them is like, well, this is like some hipster bougie thing, and LOL, it's ramp season. Are you this lame that you're going to the farmer's market for ramps? I'm like, ooh, this is like some plant, like that movie where Matt Damon is like advocating for the water industry on the low, or like pesticides or something, but he's injected into a small town as like the good guy. I'm like, who's
are you saying ramps are an industry plant or not?
I'm saying the people disparaging them are plants. And they're just like, we need to take down ramps. We cannot have ramps gain popularity over green onions. And the green onion dudes have a deal with, the New York State representative from Ithaca or whatever.
Oh yeah, big scallion. They got their
That's
they got
what
their,
I'm talking about.
They got their roots deep in the corruptive loam of our legislation branch.
Big scowl, and I don't know why I mean, food people are annoying. I am annoying. I'm into this stuff, but like, there's no reason to disparage ramps. They're pretty universally delicious.
But that said, and this is someone who went there and was like, "Ooh, ramps." and
You
bought some.
texted me.
That's
Like,
what I'm saying.
ramps
I
are
was,
back.
I was like, "Yo, ramps back." It's someone who performed that kind of despicable behavior. I will say that there are vectors that make it annoying, which are like the performative element of like I shop at farmers markets, the idea that these are available for only this tiny window of the year, like late spring, and that's it. And after that, they're gone, and they're only grown in specific places, usually along the Northeast, maybe a little bit further down the eastern seaboard. But generally speaking, they aren't available in all these different parts of the country. They aren't available year round. They're very tough to grow, if not impossible, via commercial methods.
Yeah.
They have to be sort of harvested in near
Yep.
forested waterways in like Hudson, New York.
But this
There are a
is
lot of annoying vectors, is what I'm saying, and I acknowledge that.
But this is to my point. Big scallion, big onion is just like, you know what? Vegetables have to be grown in a huge farm, mechanized, put on a truck, and brought to key food. You don't want to shop at like a farmer's market where the dude selling it to you went out in the morning and picked them. That's lame. I'm like, wait a second. No, that's okay.
Industry
Right.
plant.
Yeah.
Industry plant.
Big onion. Keep your third eye open.
No, I mean, you aren't wrong. It's like, ugh, why would you even eat something that had to be picked by an individual and is only available for like a month a year? Loser. What you want is a big scallion. You want that iceberg chokehold.
That's right. You want them wrapped in plastic with a logo of a fox on it. You can't just like
24
buy them
hours a
dirty.
day, 7 days a week, 365 days of a year. You can get your iceberg lettuce.
The R.J. Barrett of vegetables.
Put some respect on that man's name.
Yeah. Scallions, Joel Embiid. You know, I like my stuff like burning out at the biggest moment, the summer of the playoffs. Okay, we'll get to that later. But yeah, how'd you cook your ramps though?
Dude, I just went simple. Little sauteed in a little butter, scrambled some eggs with them.
Oh,
Simple stuff.
that's not simple. That's some gourmet shit. I like it.
2 ingredients, delicious. Shaved a little Parmesan on top. I think you could
That sounds
throw
awesome.
many different cheeses or no cheese at all. Whatever. Just a nice, fresh, garlicky scrambled egg or omelet. Ramps are nice. I guess butter is an ingredient.
Do you think, and I don't want to get all big onion on you, do you think it's time for you to start hosting some dinner parties?
No.
Because you got that big masa going, you got ramps in your house, you have a case of bucatini, and you're like, you can't come over.
Look, you have multiple freezers.
No, I have multiple freezer fantasies. Two different things. Yeah, kind of. True. No cap.
Your Honor.
But I mean, can't you share the wealth a little bit? I've never had ramps and eggs before. It sounds nice.
Look, you work for Big Scallion. I don't trust you.
Is that a big onion? Big onion coming the way? I do have a big head, so I fit the profile.
Oh, these are ramps. You bend over and like a bunch of chives fall out of your pocket. Excuse me?
I'm salting. I'm pouring bleach on your chives, on your masa. It's like, you got to get these tortillas from Key Food, man. I'm sorry.
In non-food related news, you've been telling me you mostly listen to like AI rap now.
Oh, yeah, man.
You're really into songs that are made by computers, like Drake and Weekend records that don't exist in a traditional sense, but have been made by artificial intelligence. That's kind of your new thing.
I like my computer perfect. I mean, I like my computer generated music because it's perfect. And there's no like personality. And there's no interludes. I don't have to deal with like mistakes. It's just verse after verse, bridge after bridge of like perfect sounds. And I was walking down the street and I just randomly heard elderly man and woman being like, well, elderly, like in their 60s, 70s or something, being like, "Did you hear that Drake Weekend AI song?" And they were like, "That was a hot song." And I almost like had to interject and be like, "It was good, right? Like, what do we do with this?" Because it was a banger, wasn't it?
Well, this is making me reevaluate Rowdy Rebel and Bobby Shmurda's song "Computers." Like, what would they? Who would name a song "Computers" other than a computer?
Ooh.
You know what's really cool? Computers, said a computer.
You know what's really cool? An onion, said me with a giant head.
So here's the thing about the AI stuff. I feel like there's this perception that you're opening your little text bar there and you're like, make me a banger.
Why do you have to make that voice though? Can't it be like,
It's like
make me
computer
a
voice.
banger. Make me a
Make
banger.
me a slapper with Drake in the Weekend. And the computer's like,
Why are you
whistles
wearing that
like-
Willis Reed jersey? Take off that
computer
Ewing
chirp.
throwback.
It like chirps and beeps and belches, and like a little smoke comes out of the top, and then it's like, here you go, here's your slapper, nerd. But the reality here is not that this is not what's happening. It's some guy producing a beat like normal. It's some guy writing lyrics that go along with a beat to mimic Drake's cadence, his intonations, his mannerisms, his personality. It's rapping that song over that beat like anyone does when they're making a actual rap song, and then they're applying a Drake filter to the vocals. And people are like, holy crap, how did they get this to sound like Drake? He would say those lyrics. This is exactly his personality. I'm like, because it's just a regular song with like a Drake auto-tune filter that someone else made.
Right.
I just feel like the conversation is weird. We're viewing it as like the output of this black box of computerized intelligence that can say like Drake would have a line about how he doesn't talk to his old girlfriend anymore. No, it's just some dude. It's biters. It's sharks, Andrew.
But we are there where it can just generate like, well, this is revealing.
Definitely can't write like convincing Drake lyrics. It could write lyrics that would be maybe something like Drake, but not convincing. They can't write with like a flow. It's not a computer. It's a person doing it.
I know,
That's all
but
I'm saying.
we're to the point where it's pretty much there, I think. But people are figuring out, like, this isn't a real pod. We're at home chilling with our ramps. Like, we're computers, right? Well, you're listening to a computer-generated AI podcast, which is still perfect. More perfect than the last, which was also computer-generated. But David Guetta also did that Eminem drop, right? And I think he plugged in the words, but and then they stylized it to sound like Eminem, and it was pretty believable-ish.
Yeah, but all I'm saying is these are just like filters. It's kind of falls into the same history of like the Chipmunks or, you know, A$AP Rocky or Houston Screw slowing down vocals, Positive K speeding them up to sound like a woman. It's the same thing. It's just a manipulation
Quasimodo.
of a vocal track.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, but I mean, the debate stands, right? That song is cool. I like it. So the debate isn't like how that song is made. The debate is like, ooh, in the near future, like we won't be able to tell who made this. That's the question, right? If it is some fan, if it's a computer, if it's an onion, if it's a ramp, you know, like we don't know the provenance of this artwork. And is that an issue? And then you get into all this nerdy stuff like the pictures generation, like Richard Prince, appropriation, photography, right? Like if a photo is of a person on the street, who does that photo belong to, you know? And I think the interesting thing, especially last night, like Blink-182 got kind of bumped down from headlining the second week of Coachella on Sunday, and Frank Ocean, a lot of stuff happened there. He's a very tough guy to get to perform on stage. Like, I think he is very relatable as some guy who's like, I'm not really into that, so I'm not going to do it. So they get 3 DJs who we talked about before, who played MSG not too long ago, Fortet, Fred Again, and Skrillex to headline. And no one seemed to have an issue with it being not live music, because it might be live music. This is the whole Tony Wilson factory thing, right? Like the medium is the artist. But the debate online wasn't if it was credible or authentic. It was if they were big enough to do it. And I think everyone agreed, like, oh, this is a great solution if Frank's not going to be there, because we're going to have a great time. And I watched some of the footage from last night. It was just like, it had less impact in an open space as it did at MSG, but Skrillex was on the decks, on the table, jumping up and down. Fred, classic, was just in a white tee, just like smiling, and Fortet was just doing their thing. And it was three guys listening to music with the crowd. And to have a difficulty talking about the provenance of sound, I think is surprising, because we've had this on the table for 40 years.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. I think with the specifically talking about the Drake and the AI and the replicating artists who are really well known, I don't really see this as cataclysmic for the record industry, because on one hand, what you're saying is correct, right? If there was I mean, there are plenty of people who can duplicate or replicate the kind of delivery, the kind of song that Drake would make, because they're fans of Drake. And we have years and years of his lyrics and his delivery to crib from, like as humans. I'm not even talking about as computers. Like, if you sat down and were like, all right, I'm going to try to write a Drake song, it would be basically like someone ghostwriting for him. Mm-hmm. If someone is good at doing that kind of thing, then it will convincingly sound like how Drake would rap, right? Mm-hmm. One of the AI Drake ones didn't sound like how Drake would rap, and it sounded like his voice. Mm-hmm. And people are like, oh, this is good. The one of the weekend. I'm like, no, it's not. This sucks.
Oh,
because it actually, because to me, it didn't sound like Drake at all.
Sure.
Sounded like his voice. That's not how he raps. Like, it was, the cadence and delivery were terrible. There was another one, someone came out who clearly is a just much better rap writer. And it sounded a lot like how Drake would rap. Mm-hmm. But my point here is, I feel like there's going to be the initial novelty to this. There's going to be some probably legal court cases where people will be capping in front of the judge.
No.
But ultimately, it seems like this will be sorted where it will just be an IP rule. And I get there are nuances to that. Like, well, what if it's not exactly him? What if we tweak it so it's not Drake? Yeah. But I do think there is some point where it's like, if you want to be a reputable artist, you're not going to come out with like a fake Drake song, just the way you wouldn't come out totally imitating him, even if it was your own voice. Because people will say, well, that was convincing, and you could ghostwrite for Drake, I guess, but it's going to get zapped. It'll be like DMC, whatever it is, DMC, whatever. It'll get takedown notice, it'll get cease and desist. Like, they won't exist as actual hits because they'll just get shut down.
And this is, yeah, go ahead, sorry.
And I was just going to say, I think the real risk is like a no-name rapper getting a hold of this kind of thing and then putting like a fake Drake verse on his song and trying to get it out there. I think that's what the real thing is less of like, people are just going to be generating Drake songs without Drake's permission. I don't feel like that's going to happen going down the line. I do think that you will have like clout demon behavior magnified.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is obviously a conversation about like intellectual property, but it is more a conversation in America about money, right? And how money is generated. And the more I think empathetic conversation is, how do artists survive in this era? Because art's important. It's what makes our lives better, etc. All this stuff. I believe in the National Endowment of the Arts, and gutting that was a big issue, and it kind of shapes a place that we don't like as much. And even if you say it's okay and artists kind of like respond to a capitalist system, it just doesn't work that way. Artists need support. But when it's about money, I think about, to your point, like when people were sued for using samples, when I think of Tribe Called Quest a little bit, because they were so sample heavy and driven by these ideas that they appropriated from their memories, from their childhood, like lovingly, and it made them a really joyous group. And then when legislation came down and people were getting sued and rights and royalties were going to sources that wanted them in court, sir, low end theory, kind of cap. And it's like, give this money back to the originators, you know? And then Tribe Called Quest put out the Love Movement with Dilla. I hated that record. It has a charm in like the Phantom Menace, Star Wars #1 does now. It just feels like a specific time and place where people were trying to compensate for like this legislation. And also creatively, it was time to move on. And now
also just as a note, and
Go ahead.
this is not to disagree with anything you're saying, but I do believe Q-Tip lost like his record collection in either a fire or a flood.
In a
some
fire.
point.
Yeah. I mean, there's stories where he's like driving down the street just like crying. Like, you know, my friends, I guess it was written somewhere, but like they rolled up to Q-Tip and he was just like heartbroken. He was like, that was my life. To my point, he felt such a connection to his collection of records that he didn't make that defined him as an artist. And to have it go away, that access to that go away, was debilitating as him as an artist. And no one would, I think, argue with the fact that he's one of the greats, right? And I think we have to find a common, like a ground where people should be able to like write a Drake verse, but also exactly to what you were saying, it has to be noted. It has to be footnoted, or gatekeepers have to say like, that's not Drake, or Drake himself has to be like, that wasn't me. Oh, Your Honor, that was Cap. And I think we're going to find a way to do this, but the next 5 years is going to yield a lot of Love Movement, unfortunately.
I mean, I get your comparison between sampling, but I also think that is sampling. I don't know. I mean, again, I totally see the parallels, whether it's like, okay, this is your artistic output and we're going to use it to create a new kind of art. I don't think that's the same as like creating an impersonation. You know what I mean? Like, you're taking a sample. It's like, you were taking the output, but like, I'm going to trick people into thinking I'm Cool in the Gang with this sample. I think that is a key difference. That there is a deception that is important here, versus it saying like, oh, I'm just creating Drake songs with Drake's voice. But if we all know that, that's one thing, and it's still weird. But if we don't know that, I think that's a different part of this conversation that's different from sampling.
I mean, yeah, for sure. I mean, I wanted to ask you an art question. Like, how do you feel about the Richard Prince photo of Brooke Shields as a kid, Spiritual America? Like, that was hanging in the Lower East Side as a storefront, and it's his name, you know, by Richard Prince, but it wasn't his photo. He just hung someone else's photo. Where do you stand on that?
And the stuff that he's done with like Instagram posts, same deal. Right,
where he writes captions to comment on posts, screen grabs it, and prints them as paintings. But the images he only wrote his comment. The images were curated by the Instagram account.
Right, or even the stuff that he did before that, where he would make paintings that are like just a fake Basquiat.
Yeah, the whole pictures generation idea was kind of behind that, and some did it more literally than others. But I believe like Robert Rauschenberg put someone else's painting into one of his paintings / collages, and now the estate of that artist is suing. I got to get that story more time, but there's still debate. I mean, Richard Prince is fighting off lawsuit after lawsuit. His art is lawsuits now. But how do you feel about that work?
I mean, I think it's interesting, and it can raise these questions that, you know, often result in courtroom capping. But I think they're pushing those buttons in the artistic world. It can be interesting, totally. But the weird thing is, I just don't find like the fake Drake stuff interesting in the same way. I don't know why. I just don't find it compelling in the way of like, is Richard Prince doing art, or is this just a cheap
Right.
trick? Is it just trolling? I think those are fun conversations to have.
But where
This
do you
stuff-
stand on it?
I mean, I don't know that it's like has a ton of merit as art. I also think it's fine to do those things and to make those like and to present a different style of art. You know, I think it's cool. I mean, I guess there's artistic merit to it. I just don't say, wow, that's awesome how he did it. But, you know, if the first time someone painted a red square, a zillion people said, well, that's not art. So I think this history of experimentation and pushing the envelope on what is considered art is valuable. So I don't have an issue with it, and I just don't think it's like I would love to have that in my house. I think it's kind of cool that he's pushing the envelope, though.
Yeah, I mean that's fair. I just think it's his work. It's his work, and I don't want to judge it based off of aesthetics if it's Drake successfully or not, because that kind of is a sliding taste scale. But if someone hung a Picasso painting next to a Richard Prince painting, it's like, are these both artworks? I'd be like, yeah. It's like, who made them? I'm like, Richard Prince and Pablo Picasso.
Yeah, I think it qualifies as art 100%. I mostly meant like, do I look at it and say, I think that's awesome? Like, I think that's great. Not necessarily, but I'm not going to say that's not art. Right. That's, I guess, just to clarify.
God, can you imagine the arguments people were having even before Photoshop of just like photography? Just being like, you cannot do that. That is like an image of someone else. That is not your work. It's their work. You're just taking the photo. It's like, no. Framing it is the art. Life goes like a straight Morse code, and interrupting it creates the language. So framing it is literally the art. And I don't need a paintbrush. I don't need sculptor's tools. All I need is the idea.
And we just saw, like last week, there was a photographer who submitted photos and I believe won some awards, and they were AI generated. And they're kind of obviously AI generated. And he also had posted them on his Instagram account last year as being AI generated. And then they were salty to find out that they were AI generated. So the whole thing was a little bit goofy in that regard.
Of course, me being a total onion, I was like, but what number is right? Because he won $5,000. And depending on, your life and what your income is, $5,000 is either a lot or a little. But he turned it down. And I was like, what's the sweet spot? Because if it was like $500,000, you'd be like, I can't do that. The profile is too high. No, I will not accept that. But what if it was like $100K? You'd be like, all right, I'll take it. that's I really need that for my mortgage, or I really need that for rent. Or if it was like $60,000, be like, okay, someone is gonna do this after me. I'm not the tip of the spear of the discussion. I will take your money. But $5K, he does better taking the PR like moral trophy than the $5,000, right?
Yeah, that's true. Or maybe he just was trying to prove a point and would have turned down any amount.
Well,
I know what you mean. Like
yeah.
At some point, like, well, that's a summer house you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I was like, oh, that's good of him. And I found out about the $5K. I'm just like, psh, doesn't get you season tickets to the Knicks, or does it? I don't know.
No.
No. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah, that's fair. But yeah, I just feel like the trajectory thus far of AI, like art and AI music, has sort of been somewhat similar. But we'll see how this plays out. Where you're like, okay, this exists now. Is this real? Is this fake?
Yeah.
And like it will. I don't know. There will be places where it will make a real dent in the industry. I think.
It's
If
scary,
you like if. I don't know that it will make a dent in like the art world, but I do think
or the art market, right?
In the art market, exactly. But in cases of, say, okay, so we license music that people make for backgrounds of commercials and things like that. I think AI is a grievous threat to that kind of industry.
Dude, it's scary. Like we're talking about
generate
DJs.
music that sounds like it would be like the background of an epic score, and it's like, all right, here it is. And you're like, okay, we don't need to hire people to do this anymore.
and please bear with me because I've been trying to rack my brain about this week. But like the three DJs who headline Coachella, and I'm like, they're popular. Skrillex is no doubt he could headline by himself. He's a beast. Fortet, fine. Fred again, maybe he's big, but like made big through workout mixtapes on Spotify, or chill out mixes on Spotify, or club mixes on Spotify, and they generate a lot of ears and a lot of commerce, right? And then someone figured out, and a reporter figured out this week, he was like, why am I hearing the same song by different artists on my Spotify random like chill out playlist? And he started paying attention, and I believe he found one song that was attributed to 59 different artists, and all Spotify did was put clip art where the artist is and made up like believable names, like DJ names, people names, strange, whatever. And what he found out was Spotify was putting these songs into its own mixes to generate hits. And that's where the real money is, these mixes that people just like leave on all day at stores, at gyms, at home, wherever. And Spotify was licensing and creating these songs, spreading them out all over the platform in maybe like tens of thousands of artists, and getting revenue from their own licensing, which is genius. They were the authors of it.
Yeah, there's some times when I'll put on, say, an RX Pappy's album.
Wow.
Just a random artist that I'm mentioning.
You're walking through Wegmans, you're shopping for your ramps at the farmer's market, and it's
my-
RX season all year long.
I'm getting my garbage plate ingredients.
Yep.
I'm rooting for the Sacramento Kings. Anyway, you put it on and you listen to the whole album, and then it starts playing someone else. And you're like, no, I want this album to keep going, or I want to keep playing from this, more pap, more Neff, and it always suggests something else. I've realized it also keeps suggesting like the same song by the same artist, and I wonder if this is tied to this algorithm, and of course it probably is. I'm like, how come every time this album ends, you're playing this song that I don't want to hear by an artist I don't know, but you keep doing it?
It's an ad. Yeah, it's targeted. I mean,
I've heard this song now 7 times, and I just go and I'm like, fuck, I have to walk over and turn it off. Like, I just keep getting the same song. No matter what I'm listening to, when this album ends, you're just force-feeding some bullshit track by an artist I don't care about. Stop doing it.
But you're the listener they hate, right? Because you pick out albums and you listen to them to their completion, and then you probably click off right away when it's a similar artist.
I'm a playlist guy. I play my own.
Yes.
Once in a while, I'll listen to something that's like a Spotify jazz playlist or something, or Northern Soul or something that I just have not compiled myself.
Garage.
But generally speaking,
Yeah.
drum and bass, the best
Hardcore
of the streets.
Jungle. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, algorithms are just like equations made by humans, so it's not even like a 4-letter word. But I thought this article or this reporting was interesting because Spotify, this was just a plan, right? This was a box and one. This is a full court press. It's like, yeah, we're kind of really not making money because these labels and artists want their cut. But what if we are the label? What if we are the artist? And then the audience we want is not Ben Dietrich. It's someone who's like, yo, I have a supermarket, so I put on a Spotify playlist for like 12 hours a day, every day. And it's the supermarket playlist. And then you just generate hundreds of thousands of listens. And then just based off of their own rules, like, this is how much we decide you get paid for a listen. It all comes back to the house.
Well, this is what we see from all these tech companies, or at least a lot of them, is that the business model changes when there's a chance for monopolization or to add more revenue streams. Because naturally speaking, these are businesses. They have shareholders and they've got investors, and they're always trying to grow. It's not like you start something like, let's say, Shopify, for example, and say, look, this is all we want to be. We're not doing anything else. Because eventually someone says, yeah, but your company is worth X. You should start giving out small business loans to the businesses who subscribe. Start offering them, $5,000, $10,000 to get their business up and running, and think of how that'll work. they can buy more merch. They can try to sell more merch. They can advertise. Either way, we're eating twice. We're gonna give you this money and then charge interest on it. But also, that's going to add to your sales potentially and your business, which we get more of a cut now. And I feel like you look across the board, and again, Shopify, they started trying to do their own like third-party logistics to do shipping. Like they just keep expanding. And the Amazon model is, of course, like the vampire squid. But all these companies, like if you're Spotify, like, okay, we are now one of the two premier places that people go and listen to music. We've worked on podcasts. We've got our own studios. We're doing this. Like, why don't we just generate music?
Dude, that's what Apple did. It's like, what industry? I mean, this is kind of backtracking a little bit, but it came to mind. Like, I used to do, for half a decade, like 5 or 6 years, I used to do playlists for stores for a high-end fashion company. And 4 times a year, I would have to give them 6 hours of music, of MP3s. And their request was so challenging, man. It was no lyrics that could possibly get us into legal trouble. So no words. And my response to them was like, but the music of like a, let's say, electronic musician, isn't that proprietary to that musician as well? And they were like, no, because they're not words. There's no authorship there. And I thought that was such an interesting take. And I don't know if they were right or not, but they were like, we're in the clear if there's no words. But I'm like, but this is a quartet song. And they're like, doesn't matter. I thought it was, I think what we have to do is figure out, and we'll never be able to do this, would be to figure out what a person makes versus what a non-person could possibly make. That's the discussion, right?
I think that's true. And while we're talking about this sort of the evolution of these tech companies, of these technologies, and Amazon again is the perfect example. It started as like a book retailer, and now it like makes, I don't know, like spatulas. Amazon has kind of taken over the box game. New York Times Magazine had a cover story about like cardboard boxes, and I do a lot of shipping, and I used to buy them from local places and like Bags Unlimited, like places that have supplied everyone's stuff since the zine era. Amazon has entered that world and demolished all the prices. They're like half the price for like 100 boxes. It's crazy. Right. So all that kind of idea, that tech companies start out with one mission or one concept and just evolve in good or bad ways. And I think part of this, like the blue check Twitter meltdown that happened over the last week, is that Twitter's evolved in like a really odd and seemingly self-destructive way that, hews to the contours of Elon Musk and his desire to be a like cool and interesting poster.
It is crazy what's happening. And I want to talk about this in basketball terms later, but I'm a grown-ass man being slandered on the street as I'm walking home with my family with a bunch of onions. And my patience for like stupid conversations is at an all-time low now. This blue check stuff, I'm kind of into it for the jokes, but like, act like we've been here, man. It's like Charlie Sheen begging for his blue check back. I'm like, leave Twitter. You're not doing anything on here. And I know it is, a lot of people are saying through all this drama, like, this is how I get paid. This is an important part of my practice. And I'm like, well, we just have to adjust because the person in charge is a knucklehead. But like, democratizing Twitter, I think, is a good idea. But him giving them, certain people, back the checks is like, does he even know what he wants?
Well, to me, there is no real plan here. And none of it really made any sense. If they've sort of put together this painstaking verification process over the last few years, that to me was like sensible. Okay, this is a well-known person. So they're gonna like a celebrity, whatever, and this is actually them.
Authorized source.
This is actually them. So they're not gonna get in trouble for something someone says pretending to be them because it's them. And unless they were hacked, in which case, like, I doubt this celebrity is trying to sell PlayStation 5s. But it was that, but also it was a lot of people in media. And I think, to me, as someone who had a blue check, that I do not care about losing it at all. But I do think when you would see a news item, and that could be in sports, politics, whatever, if the person was blue checked, you would click on it and you'd be like, who do they write for? Because I believe it. And this person's news, this person has to be sort of reputable. They aren't just some schmuck making something up if they have a blue check and then they write for someone reputable. Like, to me, it was just like a very quick way of at least presuming what you were reading had like a factual basis to a degree.
It was helpful.
And that was useful, right?
Yeah.
Because as soon as they started making them the same, this person's either legacy media or this is someone who paid for it. I'm like, oh, now we just don't know,
right,
because it's impossible to tell them apart. My thing at this point is that I do not care about the blue check thing. If we're just going to throw the whole, is this person reputable, out of the window, I think that damages the product. But to me, what really sucks about Twitter right now is that because people who have Twitter blue are like pushed to the top of the replies, when you have viral tweets that could be funny, you have to scroll through like a whole bunch of unfunny, lame, like Twitter blue subscribers, and it's really sapped the joy out of those viral tweets where you could guarantee that you were going to like laugh like 5 times if you scroll down. There's going to be good responses. They're going to float to the top because people like them and people respond to them. So instead of getting one joke, you might get like 5, 10, 20 jokes.
Yeah.
Now it's just this like glob of unfunny losers, and it actually really kind of destroys viral tweets as like an enjoyable item.
Yeah, at one point I was like, what does Elon Musk want? And then it quickly turned to like, what the hell do I want from this? I'm like, well, I want jokes. I want to experience, like, I'm not an IRL dude. I don't want to be on the street, 7th Avenue, singing White Stripes hooligan chants. Like, but I want to see it on Twitter. I want to be at my desk just like, like, I really enjoy that life. And I think it's, on one hand, I'm a nihilist about it. I'm like, just let it go. I don't think it's making our lives better. But on another hand, I'm like, I've made so many friends on here. Actually, it is a cool place that deserves or is redeemable, and we should try to make it better, right? It's good. I like it quite a bit. And
I thought it had reached a pretty good place before they sold it. Not that it was perfect. It was less wild and less funny, but it reached a sort of status quo where you could get somewhat reliable breaking news from it, and it operated as a news feed, but you could also check in with friends or people that you thought were funny, and you could kind of get what you wanted out of it. And I feel like that right now is what changed. I care less about the verification of news sources than being entertained by it. And when I am being besieged by advertisements, especially on the app, the mobile app, there's so many fucking ads. It's like one ad per 4 posts. It's outrageous how many ads are on it. And I click on a tweet and the responses are just these imbeciles who subscribe to Twitter Blue. Like, the product itself is just not as good. It feels gross, and it's not even about like the fact that there are like just misogynist weirdos and like racists that are floating to the surface now because they're
people
like
who don't
Elon
get jokes.
Fans.
Yeah.
It's just this mix of like gross people and people who are dumb and unfunny. I'm like, your product is worse, my man.
Well, you're right, and I want to add on to that. It's not.
It's only a little bit of Nazi paraphernalia. It's not that much of it, but it's there. There's some of it.
It used to be a Buddhist symbol, but the product is obviously Twitter, but it's a lot of the users, right? And like, motivation and incentive is a puzzle no one has been able to figure out in every field. But like when you make something annoying and when you put your face on it and it's the face of Elon Musk, you have smart people who use
and it's punchable.
yeah, I wanted to avoid that, but it is ignorable, and it is not the most likable. It is not a picture of Jalen Brunson, who is the most universally loved man on all of planet Earth. But like, when you de-incentivize smart people for posting weird ideas, because when they do it, morons chime in, and I think really great tweeters respond to people and try to chat with them. But when it's just like stupid trolls, ads, and all to the benefit of Elon Musk, you have a lot of like good tweeters kind of like pulling their punches, and that creates a worse product. And I'm really grateful for the five, yourself included, the 5 people I love to follow on Twitter, and everyone else can go fuck themselves, kind of. I'm looking for you 5 to like make me laugh, make me think, anger me. It's all good, like that's why I like this website. If you guys go away, I'm out. And I just think when you de-incentivize smart, funny people from being smart and funny, you're making a really bad business decision.
Yeah, that's my main take on the changes, is that it wasn't perfect, it wasn't great, but you've just made it substantially shittier. And if I'm going to be exposed to more and more stupid people on a daily basis, if it's going to be like just flooded with like inane advertisements, I'm like, why would I be on this website? Why would I want to contribute to it? And in some ways, this kind of makes me think of like the Models and Bottles like idea for New York City nightlife, right?
And nachos and meatballs.
No, this is well, that's for Lavo only. But hear me out. That business model of having, hot young women and promoters who would wrangle them in to sell tables to guys who were businessmen was something that really disrupted New York City nightlife in a way that made it infamous among people who liked the kind of spots that we did. And we would just use that sort of quasi-derogatory but also totally accurate descriptor of a place like Pink Elephant. It's a Models and Bottles spot. Like Avenue. Well, Andrew's DJing. There'll be a few people upstairs with Paul Sev, but it's a Models and Bottles spot.
For sure.
Like that's what it is. And that became like the face of New York City nightlife, and spread globally if it wasn't already in places. But I was talking with someone recently who works in nightlife, and they were like, well, that business model's, I keep using model back and forth, but that business model is kind of kaput right now. Because the cool people just stop going. The models also stop going. People just aren't interested in going to these spots where it is like business guys and tables drinking vodka with champagne. Like, it still exists. There are still some people who do it. The business model is somewhat viable, but it's not like it was 15, 20 years ago. Because no cool people want to roll with a promoter and sit in a spot and drink like 42 below vodka and listen to like cheesy music. No one really wants to do it. There's a population, but once the hot chicks and the cool people that promoters brought in decided that they were fully out on this idea, then the guys with money are like, well, why would I do it then?
Yeah, and I think of Supreme, and the group that James Dolan bought, the nightlife company, basically, that does
Tau Group.
Tau, that does Marquee, Avenue, Lavo. It I think is trying to do the Supreme thing. It's like, okay, we're gonna lose the cool people that made this place cool, and we have to transition to like Las Vegas, Dubai, like too big to fail kind of stuff. And Supreme lost all of its coolness, but it is bigger than ever because it has reached a point where it has hit their outside of their target market and is generating so much of that they can like put Akko and Atiba on their skate team and close, and they're good to go because the people who know they're part of it. But like you don't have the tertiary people right outside of it interested anymore, and then outside of that even you have the money. And I think that is always the trick, knowing that it's going to run. The only reason I DJ'd at Avenue, as you know well, was it had just opened up and they were trying to generate some buzz. And the way you do that is you go downtown where the talent is cheap. Like I did not make that much money there. And kids would come up and you'd be like, I remember it'd be like, any one of your friends can get in. You do not have to wait on the line with everyone else. If they're friends with you, here's the password, just go straight in. The guy with the fingerless leather gloves took care of us. And then I remember I quit because they stopped letting my friends in. I'm like, hey, if my friends can't come in just because they're wearing camo shorts, respectable, I understand that. But like, I think I'm done here. Like, these are my friends, you know? And they're like, well, you've done your job. Business is good. We don't need you anymore, you know? And they had passed that Rubicon. But I think it is a really stressful place to be, dealing with what you're talking about. Being like, you're on the clock a little bit, and if you don't play it right, it'll just go away as fast as it came.
Yeah, and that's my thing with all these social media networks. Yeah. That when the people who made it interesting or the people who made it cool decide to bounce, you look around the party and you're like, wait a minute.
I know.
Whoa! Yeah, what happened to this place?
Yeah.
I thought this place was cool. I'm looking around, it's a bunch of guys who subscribe to Twitter Blue. Like they're like talking about shooting to the moon with Dogecoins. Ugh. Oh yeah. There's got to be another spot to hang out, right? You know.
Yeah. I mean,
you want some 42 below vodka?
I was thinking, to your point, I was watching the Knicks game yesterday afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
Fucking psyched, man. It was like a tiny dream come true. I know it's shooting low, but like, we have a good team that can take another good team. I'm confident. And if they lose, whatever, but like solid. And, Bing Bong Nation is going strong, right? And I was like, why do I feel like a disconnect a little bit to this moment? I just don't feel like I'm a part of it the same way. Part of it's because I'm washed, but it's to what you're talking about. I feel like it's a bunch of businessmen like going nuts. And I'm like, it scans the crowd. It's like John McEnroe, Jon Stewart, and a bunch of white guys in button-downs. Respect to white guys in button-downs. And I was like, these aren't my people. God damn it. Where are my Knicks people? And I realized, sadly, Ben, I don't have many.
So I was at the game yesterday, and it was the first Knicks playoff game I'd been to in 23 years, maybe?
Yeah.
Was it 22? I went in 2000, and that was when the Knicks played the Pacers. I can't remember if I went to the one that
2000.
They were down 0-2, and then they won 1, or if they were down 2-1, and they won that to even the series. I can't remember which one I was at specifically. Mm-hmm. But that was the only other Knicks game I've ever been to. Went to a couple Nets games.
Not the same at all.
2 seasons ago.
Yeah.
Nets games were fun, and obviously watching KD drop like 49 points was incredible. Mm-hmm. But energy-wise, really no comparison. I don't think I've ever been to a sporting event other than like the Cookies Hoops Classic 1 and 2.
That was crazy.
That had that kind of palpable energy. And I don't know that it was different from a playoff game in, say, OKC. Like I'm not saying New Yorkers have a different kind of enthusiasm.
But they do, though. But I know.
But I'm just saying I'm just saying I don't know.
So
I'm not going to sit here and say. Yeah. Like, I haven't been to a playoff game in those environments. I can't speak to it, but I will say the energy was delightful, man. Yeah. It was so fun. Mm-hmm. From I would say every single possession of the game, there was a defense chant, and every offensive possession, you stood up. It was for the whole game. It was really extremely entertaining. And I do think the experience of basketball in the Garden is special. I think we agree with that. Whether it's tied to the crowd somewhat, or it's tied to the organ or the room, there is something about the Garden that is just fucking rocks.
Fat Joe courtside.
Yeah, it was all the usual suspects. There's Stiller, there's Pete Davidson, it was all the people you expect.
Sure.
But it was extremely fun. And watching like a big game in the Garden and seeing everyone spill out on like 7th Avenue and people just like yelling and roaring in the streets. I'm like, this is a first round game.
I know. Act like you've been there, but we haven't been there, so let's go. Yeah, and the thoughts I'm kind of trying to work through is like, I love the NBA more than ever. My interest in Major League Baseball is slothed off. Football, I don't care about. Boxing, I do less of. No sin bin for any of those things. But like, I love basketball more than ever, more and more so. But I feel a disconnect towards the sports culture of it, because I feel like through Twitter, maybe to the point of our last conversation, some of the things that I think about are just so stupid. And I watch Kendrick Perkins, and I love Stephen A. Smith and all this stuff, and I'm like, wait, my brain is full of bullshit. And it is not the thing I love, which is basketball. And there's certain people who I love. Talk about main characters on Twitter, like Pablo's back hard, like Network is back after I feel like a semi-hiatus. And like, those are 2 of the 5 people I love because they're funny, they're smart, all this stuff. That's what I want. And when I'm at the Garden, I've been to a few games. I mean, I get offers to go to these games, not to brag, but like, I'm reluctant to go because I'm having less and less fun. And it's a lot of the personification of a Twitter that I'm trying to get away from, like Bing Bong, White Stripe stuff, like just jock stuff that I didn't get into basketball because like athletes rule. I got into basketball because like the stories were unreal and undeniable.
I mean, I thought yesterday's game was like so much fun. And I will say, I feel like maybe I don't mind the drunken psycho behavior, but yesterday's game was not really that as much because it was a 1:00 start. And look, it's the playoffs. The tickets are expensive. It was not a loony bin out there in the way that it's sort of portrayed by like, Side Talk New York or whatever.
Right.
Like, those people are there. It was enthusiastic. It was super fun, but it wasn't like an insane asylum.
But that's not even what I'm talking about. Like, I don't want to be sitting to my right, if I have great seats, at like a dad and looking at a dad and 2 of his kids and him being like, you know what the problem was with them? They don't have that dog. And I'm like, I just don't want to be here, man. Like, you seem nice, but like, and then they'll like nudge me and be like, who doesn't want it enough? Mitchell Robinson. And I'm like, I can't think about this anymore. Of course I can. Of course I could do all this stuff. It's wonderful. It's a great life. But like, the fatigue, I have the fatigue.
I hear that. I feel like I got my second wind.
Yes, I love it. You got that.
Talk about dogs. Talk about dogs. X-ray. Look at the pooch in my lungs.
I love it, man. I love it.
That was fun. Let's just quickly talk about that series, and then we can talk about some other stuff in our remaining time. But so, Knicks are now up 3-1. They will most likely advance, and we don't need to talk about who they'll play next round because we don't know yet. That series is TBD. We have the Heat up 2, Giannis hurt, very, very up in the air.
So
who the Knicks
frustrating.
opponent would be. But let's just talk about Knicks Cleveland because coming into this series, we talked on the show and we gave the Knicks a fighting chance, both of us. And they match up well with them, and they have during the regular season as well. But there were some worrisome stats about the Cavs having the second best net rating in the league, having the
Number
best
one
luck adjusted net rating, the number 1 defense. And, those were reasons to say that the Knicks may struggle against them, even though we've seen them have some success over the course of the regular season. without asking about like, are you surprised? Just no, like let's talk like real basketball shit here. No, you know what I mean? Like not like, oh my god, I can't believe they're doing this. It feels so cool. I mean, how are the Knicks doing this? What's happening on the court that's allowing the Knicks to come to a somewhat shocking 3-1 lead over Cleveland?
And the Knicks aren't necessarily playing well or shooting well, but even a compromised Cavs team that isn't rolling is a good defense. Some random thoughts I have are, everyone speaks of the Cavs not having proper wing players, wing shooters, shooting, defense. Okoro, LeVert, I like them, but this is a playoff series. Every minute counts. And my thought is, if you're going to have a twin towers like Mobley and Jared Allen, and they're not stretching. Mobley can stretch, but he's not doing it. If you're taking up one of those roster spots at the expense of a wing player on the court, I'm like, Mitchell Robinson could just park down in the paint and do Mitchell Robinson type things, and he's changing the series. He, I think, is their best weapon. Not their best player, but their best weapon this series. The way he's altering shots, the way he's dominating these two other bigs with his size, and just he's great. Kevin Love would have been useful here, right? Like, they let Kevin Love go for nothing out of the goodness of their organizational heart to have him go where he wants to go. But like a stretch five is exactly what they need to get Mitch to kind of wander around.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. We called that move unserious.
Yeah.
Couple weeks back.
Yeah.
And I still feel that way. Like,
dude.
I look at what the Knicks are able to do defensively when they're going against a team that has only two bigs. Sometimes they're on the court together. Sometimes it's only one. Mm-hmm. But they can't get Mitchell Robinson out of the paint.
Yeah.
And that means that he is keeping their bigs from scoring easy buckets. He's keeping them off the glass. He's able to disrupt the drives from their scoring guards.
For sure.
And then all the responsibility for scoring is basically being funneled towards Garland and Mitchell, which is generally their plan overall, but they're getting more or less nothing from the front court. So there's this huge burden on those two guys, and the Knicks are just running extra defenders at them every time they get into the lane. Mm-hmm. So they're left with two options: shoot a pull-up mid-range jumper, a contested three, or kick out to someone like LeVert or someone like Okoro or another guy on the perimeter, Danny Green, Rubio. I mean, Dean Wade's barely playing. Chetty Osman. Basically say, your offense is going to be a guy we want to shoot threes or we are comfortable with, or hard shots. And the Cavs offense is in absolute shambles. What you said a second ago. The Knicks offense has been shitty too.
Yeah,
they're
good.
Shooting 43% from the floor, 27% from three. Yeah. They're getting nothing from IQ, nothing from Randall. Brunson's been good, not great.
Yep.
He's been good.
Yep.
RJ, big plays, he's been bad.
He's been bad. Even yesterday he was bad. He shot well.
Yesterday was okay, but just overall, he scored better yesterday. But overall, I mean, his scoring efficiency for the series through 4 games is 51%. Randall's is 41%. They are getting nothing from these guys offensively, but they are making some big plays, and they've kind of shared the burden of doing that. Mm-hmm. But the last point I was going to make, it goes back to what you were saying about Kevin Love and Cleveland. And the comparison I would give is the Cavs are on vacation and packed wrong. Okay, we're going to the beach. It's give me my flip-flops. I got my flip-flops, my Cookies Hoops tee. Mm-hmm. I got my camo cargo shorts, sun visor, some towels. This is going to be awesome. And then you show up and it's chilly and rainy. You're all right, I don't necessarily need, a Three Musketeers leather or a Chuckles puffer, but a windbreaker would be nice. A pair of Drees long pants might come in handy. They just don't have the wardrobe. So you can mix things up and say all right, I think I have a hoodie here somewhere. That might work. And it's you just don't have the right components to play against the Knicks. You don't have a reliable 3-and-D guy. Danny Green could serve that role, but the guy's only played in 8 games all season.
Yeah.
They clearly don't have the trust or chemistry with him to say, you're going to play 30 minutes. And they don't, they've taken Okoro basically from playing 22 minutes a game to playing 14 because he can't shoot and the Knicks won't guard him.
Right.
And you're just seeing this sort of breakdown of their lineup where someone like Kevin Love would have made a lot of sense.
Yes.
He was playing 20 minutes a game, and now you're dividing that up and basically just saying, we're going to play our starters 38, 40 minutes a game. We're just going to kind of sling some wings in there on occasion. Okay, LeVert's starting now. Like, LeVert isn't very good.
I know.
You're just adding another guy who, I know he shot well for the Cavs this year, but he isn't a good shooter historically.
Right.
I don't know. I just look at that team and I said, you did not dress for this series.
And this is what a 7-game series is, right? Like, everyone shows up and it's dreary. But then you go to the hotel shop and you have a credit card and you're like, I'll take that Alexei Shved jersey. Right? Like, then I'll be ready for everything. But the Cavs don't have the credit cards. Like, sir, your car has been denied. Your card is capped. And they're just like, oh, we're in big
Your
trouble.
Honor.
Yeah. We're going to be stuck in our Chuckles leather. It's like, well, why is everyone picking up? Well, why is our dinner partner have the Alexei Shved jersey? It's just like, well, he was ready just in case it was cloudy, right? And
this is a Capital One card. No. Look closer. It's a Cap card.
that's right. Sorry, I'm gonna have to cut this right here. I'm getting orders from the bank. But the Cavaliers were too thin, and that was a knock on them going in. I thought they were underappreciated in the regular season. I thought the ABC, ESPN, NBA TV powers that be should have given them more discussion, more words, because it was a new up-and-coming team that was performing well. Like, we just needed a little bit of discussion there. None, because they didn't schedule any games. They're selling ads, right? So when we finally... Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I'm backing you up on this, but I will say the conventional wisdom about them and what we felt about them overall, despite those numbers, was that they aren't as good as the elite teams in the East.
No.
And they really weren't able to beat them consistently all year either. I'm with you. They were not a team that was getting hyped up because they did not have marquee television matchups. Yeah. I also do think if they'd been out there beating the Sixers and the Celtics and the Bucks or the Knicks, they would have been taken a little more seriously too.
Yeah. And the lack of personnel, just to get back to one basketball thing, like, I think a serious weakness the Knicks have is Jalen Brunson defensively. And the Cavs were attacking him relentlessly. They were isolating him, trying to set picks on him, just freeing up Garland and Mitchell. But if you don't have a stretch and Mitch could just park down there, you're relying on jump shooting from those two. And if they get cold, they get cold, right? Like, you're not manufacturing free throws. You're not manufacturing easy buckets. You're not manufacturing dunks. Because Mitchell Robinson is awesome. He's been awesome all season. We've been talking about this. Like, he is the secret sauce. He's a part of a big three. He's that effective. When they bench him for a second, I'm like, what are you doing? Like, play him until, like, he uses up all of his fouls. But that is a real flaw in the Cavs' foundation. Mitchell went cold, but Garland is playing fine. But I think architecturally they are in big trouble.
You know, one thing about the playoffs that's really delightful is that sort of, potential ideas become kinetic. Like during the regular season, if you saw RJ Barrett put up 26 points or whatever he did, like pretty good scoring, but you look at the rest of it and you're like, he's not giving us, passing, rebounding, defensive statistics. 0 of 6 from the three-point line, missed a lot of foul shots. You would say, I know he scored pretty well, but there are some ominous, omens here for, like, when this really matters, these things are going to come back and burn the Knicks. Mm-hmm. What's fun about a playoff game is like, yeah, they won anyway. Move on. It's great. There is no, like, ooh, this is a bad sign. Like, no, this is it. This counts.
Ooh. Yeah.
He didn't do some things well that he has not been doing all year, but he put up 26. He had some big buckets late, and he helped them win that game.
Uh-huh.
And we know some of those things he did poorly hurt them in the game as well. Yeah. But end of the day, they got the W, and RJ had some big buckets. They were chanting RJ Barrett in the stairwells, echoing RJ Barrett.
I love it.
It was beautiful. I had people on some of my group chats being like, "Yo, RJ scoring those buckets brought a tear to my eye."
Yes.
I just believe in this guy, and he struggled, and watching him come up big when we needed him the most. I'm like, this is why the playoffs are so cool.
Yeah.
Because losers like me and you can't say, yes, but he shot poorly from, 3-point range, and that's going to burn them later on. I was like, it didn't burn them. They won.
Yeah.
RJ was one of the heroes. When they needed someone to get some buckets, Barrett was there. Yeah. And I think that's a cool thing about the playoffs, right?
The present is the most fun. I know the future is building picks. If I was a Thunder fan, I'd be really pleased and excited. The past, a lot of franchises rest on their success, their past success. Awesome. But the present is such a unique, joyful kind of place to be where, people make fun of the Timberwolves last year, like Pat Bev, Karl Anthony Towns getting emotional when they made the play-in. That's a cool moment, man. It's human. When Joel Embiid cries, and you're like, you will live to win MVPs and play in bigger games. But watching that visceral reaction is the opposite of what I was talking about before. This is what I care about, right? It's there's so many dogs. They're everywhere. It's a Westminster dog show, And I was really excited about yesterday's game because it felt like we had this. Us and the Knicks, the fans and the Knicks had this game from jump, and it got tight. But I wasn't that stressed. I was like, let's do this. Just hammer them down in the fourth quarter. And RJ scoring is awesome. I'm super critical of him. He had a weird 2 rebounds, 1 assist, 0 for 6 from 3, 62% from free throw. But to your point, they fucking won.
Yeah, it's the immediacy is what counts. And I think regular season games I really enjoy, whether it's watching them on TV or going. Love it. But to me, they never have stakes unless they do have literal stakes. This is the game to make the playoffs or not, whatever. Mm-hmm. Winning home court, I don't care about that shit. It's hard to make me care about the outcome of any regular season game. Maybe a few. Mm-hmm. The Sixers are playing the Celtics. I really would like the Sixers to win. But there are very few where I sit there, I'm like, oh, fuck. Yeah. And then the game's over, and I feel any remaining emotion after the game is over. Yeah. Typically, regular season game ends, I'm like, all right, anyway.
Yeah. It's like, oh, God damn it. Anyway.
Check back in 2 days.
Yeah.
And I've kind of even feel that to some degree with the playoffs, that it doesn't really linger with me afterwards. But in the moment, this is it. Yeah. And you can tell that certain players, like IQ, I'm not going to say he's not ready for prime time. You can tell he's feeling a certain way. You can tell he doesn't really want to shoot because he hasn't had enough shots going down. He knows he has to, but he is not taking shots during the series that he normally always takes during the regular season. They kick out to him. He's got space. He's hesitating. And I get it, man. We've all been there. You want to contribute. If you're wide open, you'll take it. But if your shot isn't dropping, it's hard to be eager to go out there and put that shot up when it really, really counts. Playoffs are kind of different like that, man.
I mean, the mental is something we can argue, when that means a lot and when it means even more. And the playoffs are interesting. I was watching the Nuggets Timberwolves, and the Timberwolves pulled out the victory last night, but you saw them kind of the mental fatigue they had. And the mental fatigue Jokic did not have. And I'm like, all the slander that rightfully I'm grateful for that the Embiid nation put on Jokic, kind of altering the narrative of him being well, is he bad? We had people questioning, oh, he's only a one-way player. He can't play defense. Therefore, he cannot be great. But watching his fortitude last night, just being are we going to go on an 11-0 run to tie this game in the last 4 minutes? Or 3 minutes? I'm Jokic was just calm and dominating. And I love to see it on a big stage because he's done this all season. But when he's fine, he's going to win this series, but obviously. But to watch this stuff on this kind of stage, this is why I love the Warriors. Like every year, Barkley's like, you can't win the way they play. And at the end, he's still saying that, and they're still winning.
You know, it's funny when you look at, you know, the Minnesota lineup and going out and saying, Rudy Gobert is going to anchor this team. That's the guy we're going to target. We're going to give up the future for Gobert. And maybe part of it is them, you know, trying to be more aggressive and letting Gobert go one-on-one with Jokic. But it is funny to see, like, Jokic like, cool, you got Rudy Gobert. Let me drop 43 on his dome, going like on 26 field goal attempts. When the hell does Jokic take 26 field goal attempts? Like, oh, when he goes against the franchise defensive center that you mortgaged your future for. Like, nice.
He was just taking like these running floaters, and Gobert was like getting ready to jump, and the ball was in the air. I'm a Jokic fan. I'm glad Joel is going to get MVP, but damn, it's good to see him like dominating another great player.
Yeah. And look, I mean, this is kind of like what we talk about the debates with like Jordan or LeBron. Like, no one's saying either of them is bad.
Yeah, that's true. Right.
So, you know, moving on from the Knicks series a little bit here, and you know, we got a little bit of time. I feel like we got the Sixers closeout of the Nets. I think we predicted a sweep. I think I did. You might have said 5 games.
I don't know.
But again, I'm not even taking a victory lap for it. I'm just like, I just didn't think the Nets were that good.
The Nets are not a playoff team. The playoff team is no longer there.
No, and yes, I agree with that. And it's weird because the story of this Nets team will be that of the failed, you know, Kyrie and KD duo, and that other attempts at turning it into a trio, of course. But generally, this will be perceived as like they failed, and we won't talk about it as if this was an owner who decided that he wasn't ready for the smoke of being a real contender with real stars and just hit like the reboot button. That won't be the story of the season. Joe Tsai being freaking weird.
Strange.
And taking a team that won 18 of 20 and blowing it up in like an unprecedented move. Taking a contender who won 18 of 20 and saying, not interested. We'd much rather rebuild. Total unprecedented weirdo ownership move.
He had that Cap One credit card, and he was in the gift shop. I'm like, sir, you're not getting that Shved jersey.
And the fact that it was celebrated by the media suspiciously, a lot of Celtics fans and even Knicks fans in that mix were like, this is a great idea. Take it apart. Oof. And someone could also say, well, look, they got swept last year, they got swept this year. What's the difference? I'm like, well, the difference is they had a chance of winning a title this year, a very good chance. And now I look at this team and I'm like, well, where do you go from here? You know, Simmons damaged goods clearly does not like Jacques Vaughn. Mm-hmm. He may not recover from his back or knee injury. You're going to have to pay Cam Johnson a lot of money because he's good. Mm-hmm. Bridges is a really good player who makes a good amount of money.
He's a hold.
You still got Joe Harris under contract, right? Like, how do you turn this Nets team into a contender? I just don't know where the Nets go from here.
It's going to be a long road. It's not immediate. And yeah, to your point, Cam Johnson's going to get paid, and there was rumored he was going to get paid in Phoenix. I really like him, and even, you know, advanced metrically, he's good. He's very good. But like, is he superstar max contract good? I'm like, ooh, if you pay him that and you take up that cap space, like, you're kind of locked in a little bit. And the key is to get Cam Johnson on a rookie deal. But I don't think they have to press. I think they have a star in Mikal Bridges, and I don't know their incoming pick situation, but if they let Seth Curry just go, maybe if they don't sign Cam Johnson, Brooklyn's still a very appealing place. They play, their practice facilities are awesome. This is still a good place. The one knock on them is their weirdo owner, who I think deserves a deep dive from some journalist.
I mean, if they're willing to bundle up a lot of those KD picks and like Simmons, they might be able to put together like something for Lillard, but it's still tough. I just don't know how you turn this team into a really good one unless you can get the version of Simmons that we saw in Philly, which physically I don't know if we'll get. That's just a total like wild card, unclear. But I look at the rest of them, like Mikal Bridges, he's on a very good contract for being like a star player, and I think he's a star. I don't think he's a superstar. I think he's a star.
Yeah, he's there.
We know his pronouns. He may not be him,
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
But he's a guy. He's good.
Yeah, for sure.
But you still got Claxton for another year on an affordable deal. I don't know. I just look at this team and I'm like, okay, so you got $40 million in Simmons. You got 23 some million dollars or I'm sorry, 30 some million dollars in Joe Harris and Finney Smith.
They can move around. I don't think they should trade for Lillard. I don't think they should trade for an aging star right now. 5 years ago, if Lillard was available, sure, but his timeline is different. I don't think they do that. Lillard has a comparable team in Portland, maybe currently. However much I love Mikal Bridges, I just think you just try to hit home runs. Like if you can isolate like the Lauri Markkanens, who was on the Cavs. Like I always forget the Cavs traded away Lauri Markkanen. But to find a player like that, and they're out there. Players, Mikal Bridges is one of them. Someone who didn't get the usage, but clearly can ball.
Well, ironically, the only guy on that team who does have like high end upside that we have seen, because he was an All-NBA player and a DPOI candidate, is Simmons, who Jacques Vaughn declared like unfit to play for the team, and clearly is going to be asked for a trade this offseason and wants no part of this anymore either. So like, if you could theoretically get back a version of him that was like the one in Philly, and then you have these other players like Bridges and Cam Johnson, then it starts to make a little sense. But if they're going to get a star that isn't Simmons, you've got to use his money to do it. So I don't know.
I would target
Ben
Simmons, and he's on the team. I would just like try to. You want to get those like the Latrell Sprewell type players. Like, how did he become available? Like a strange story. It's like we'll take him because we're not going to get. Gonna get someone like him for their value. For a discount. I mean.
I would just, to me, I think if Simmons is healthy, I believe he'll be a great player again. I would like to see him away from Jacques Vaughn and with a team that does have a stretch five. The Nets with Claxton and even some of their backup bigs, they just never showed any interest in putting a big man who could shoot on the floor with Simmons. They either use him as a small ball five or with two non-shooting big dudes. I don't really care where he ends up. I just would like to see him healthy and in a lineup that has a natural, like a Brook Lopez type guy, or something along those lines. I mean, that's one of one, but
these are great. This is a great prototype because like Horford and Luke Cornett, like I don't know why some teams go away from the stretch five. It is such a useful. I forget which player spoke of it this week. They were like, it's really hard for me to run around chasing around a big shooter. Like, it takes me out of my game. I don't like it. I'm like, I don't know why we abandoned. I don't know why certain teams abandon that, because that.
Well, the real reason is that for whatever you add on offense, it's tough to find a Brook Lopez. It's tough to find a guy who can anchor the paint and be an elite rim protector, but also shoot threes. I mean, there aren't many Joel Embiids. It's easier to find a Nick Claxton or
Kessler.
Mitchell Robinson or Walker Kessler, who are all really good players and serve a specific purpose as a defensive anchor. But there aren't many of those guys who can also knock down some threes.
Robin Lopez shares the DNA with the number one player in that regard, and he doesn't do that.
Totally. So, anyway, I guess my thing is, like, Brooklyn, currently back where they're supposed to be in, irrelevance in the city. The Knicks are throwing impromptu parades on 7th Avenue.
I told you. I was at that night. I was at
all
Barclays.
all is right with the world.
I was at Barclays and they had a DJ, and he was like in the open space in front of Barclays Center, and they had a DJ blasting like 90s rap. And
Are you working?
Yeah. Well, yeah, like Blackstreet, Snoop Dogg, like all this stuff. And I was like, yeah, I love what they did with the Cause jersey, of course, but like we've talked about that. But like a bunch of tryhards over there in Barclays, gotta say.
I will say they did play Gangstar Are You Working at the Knicks game?
Of course they did. Wait, when did Billy Idol drop?
Oh, you mean Billy Joel?
Oh, Billy Idol, Moni Moni. And I feel
I don't.
right.
Ooh, yeah, I don't know when they played that.
They never played Billy Joel though, right? Billy Joel wrote a song about me. It's called Uptown Dude.
That's you. Anything else playoff wise you want to get into? Because
I want a bellyache about Joel Embiid getting hurt. Not his fault, but goddamn, I'm frustrated. Conference Finals, Knicks Celtics. Who you got?
You're assuming the Celtics get by the Hawks then.
Yo, Hawks taking one game was very odd. I looked at the TV and I was like, are the Hawks going to win this game?
I had a really good time because I watched the game with the Celtics fan. Just being like, wow.
Oh, God.
Nothing matters until a home team loses. They're playing them even.
The Hawks kind of had them playing hard in Game 4. I was like, this should not be happening. But DeJounte Murray's going to get suspended probably and whatever. But as we talked about.
I was just imagining like, a doleful bagpipe wailing fuck Trae Young somewhere in the streets of Southie.
That's one of the things I don't like about the internet. Certain things that we were talking about, like the footage of Knicks fans on escalators being like, fuck Trae Young. And the response being like, oh, real estate in your head. I'm like, that just means nothing. That's a hilarious thing to think. Like it's
people were yelling it yesterday.
That's what I mean. Yeah, I saw that footage. It's awesome. This is what we like when 50 Cent holds grudges for a decade. It's like, well, Ja Rule really has real estate in his mind. I'm like, yeah, but it's a mansion. It's good, or it's profitable.
But also, it's also kind of a sign of respect for Trae Young.
Yeah, man.
Like he came into the Garden and just bitched everybody. He stood on the logo and took a bow.
That was super fun.
Like, yeah, he hasn't gotten his payback yet.
Yeah. Like, yeah, I hate all these things like real estate in your mind. Karma is stupid. Because now look at Trae Young, right? Karma, like when does this end? When he joins the Lakers and they win a championship, like karma, like whatever. But this kind of thought that I don't like mic drop culture. I tried to watch Succession last night. I made it through 20 minutes. I turned it off because I hate these people. And I hate the conversation around it. I just don't like mic drop stuff. That's all.
Thankfully, a conversation you will never hear is about Jaylen Brown and his shoes.
Oh. Purple and gold? Does he want to go to the Lakers?
We've talked about Jaylen Brown a bunch and how he's begging for people to interrogate his alternative belief system, and Boston media just won't do it. It's so great.
I wouldn't. Hey, if I ran a company like The Ringer and Jalen Brunson did that, I'd be like, oh, well, I wouldn't wear those shoes, would you?
He shows up in my I'm wearing my fuck James Naismith 5s. I'm like, that's a cool colorway.
Yeah. Oh, what a intelligent man. Like, what a thinker he is.
Oh, hey, Mom. It's like, what do you think of my new swastika forehead tattoo?
Oh, Jesus.
Oh, honey, that's a Swahili symbol.
Yeah, what about my Buddhist retros? It's before all
They
that stuff.
They just will not ask him when he's just
No.
dying to be asked. He's like, "You have any questions about my shoes?" Which depict a sculpture that has African features that was down in South America, where they invented a sport that has a ring and use a rubber ball. Would you like to ask me any questions about my claim that basketball is invented by a black man? Like, oh, that's a nice colorway.
These are not Lakers colors. It's a fraternity that everyone loves.
And also the whole thing of it being the colors of the group that was outside of Barclays.
Dude, amazing.
That he didn't know who they were. Like, oh, absolutely, it was a common era. The Jaylen Brown thing has reached the point of being so awesome.
And ironically, from a player who has had a media push behind him, right? There was like a couple of articles in the New York Times and the Ringer being like, "What a wonderful, thoughtful."
They were trying to
man.
get him all NBA. It was an
Yes.
attempt by the Celtics fan who writes about basketball for the New York Times and the Ringer to make him an all NBA player.
Watching this stuff is interesting because I thought Donovan Mitchell was going to have a Reggie Miller-esque presence in this series this week at the Garden. And he hasn't, because the media hasn't manufactured any stories. Like, he's an outspoken guy. He's a troll, too. And he's got that Mamba mentality. He's a Jordan originalist. I was like, oh, my God, it's going to be Ice Tray number 2, more Ice Trays. And there's no heat behind it because the media has not written about him.
But also, he just hasn't performed on that level.
But
Say what we want
right.
about Reggie Miller and his villain persona, but he earned that. Same with Trae Young.
True, but I mean, Donovan Mitchell is one of the great postseason performers. He's dropped huge numbers in the postseason, and him going cold, you would have thought they'd be chanting his name on the escalators, but Knicks fans don't care about him.
That's what I mean. He hasn't burned them yet. Like, he had a big game of the Garden, but it was a regular season game.
Right.
And also, the difference with Donovan Mitchell a little bit is that he definitely got booed more than anybody else during opening intros. But one, he has not done villainous stuff in this series because he has not played well, and Garland has. People don't like Garland
I like
because
Garland
Garland
so
yells at he has embraced the villain role. Like, after he scored, he stared down the crowd and yelled at them.
Yeah.
Like,
I love it.
Like, Garland's played with some spark that Mitchell has not. Mitchell's been a little vacant-eyed out there, but also Mitchell wanted to come and play in New York, and everybody knows it.
Exactly. There was that.
He wanted to be here, and they wanted him here. So, you'll still taunt him, but it's kind of like, hey, we got our guy. He's cool too, but he did want to come here, and I wanted him here. It's hard to roast the guy.
I had this thought yesterday, and I love that the Knicks are doing this with Jalen Brunson and Josh Hart and Mitchell Robinson instead of a sports car like Donovan Mitchell. They made that calculus, and I think they went with their guys. They have such a New Jersey vibe to them, and I think that bears a little explanation. It's what I'm thinking is remember that era where all these rappers were going platinum, like Cam, Fat Joe, Ja Rule, and it was the era of MTV Cribs, and they all kind of went into this enclave in New Jersey, this gated community, and bought McMansions, and that's kind of what I feel like. It's this team. I mean, Brunson's from New Jersey, but the difference between New York and New Jersey is a fine line. But I look at these guys, and I'm especially Josh Hart, rapping in his car when he got traded. I'm these guys definitely have a Fat Joe vibe to them.
Well, yeah, Josh Hart is just Red Cafe.
Love it. I just love
reborn.
it.
He was very extra yesterday, but has played generally kind of great despite some over-enthusiastic plunges to the rim and some really bad turnovers in transition where he just has legs and mind just weren't syncopated together.
Yeah, right. Where he traveled before passing. He's I did that.
He did 3 times.
Yeah,
but his offensive rebounding And overall, just rebounding in general has been really valuable. And he had those 2 huge late rebounds that led to that Brunson 3.
Yeah, man.
That was like an ecstatic moment yesterday.
Well,
When
we talked.
the missed 3 into the rebound into the made 3. That was pretty much the dagger. That was it was a movie.
He was him in that movie. That movie. I mean, we talked about
We knew the pronouns.
when the Knicks. I think like whatever freezing cold takes whatever. I think we got the Knicks right this season. Better than 500. A possibility of that. But when they traded for Josh Hart, I think we were both like, oh, depending on the matchup, like they might make a run in the playoffs. Like that is a fantastic fit on the court and off the court for them.
It felt like someone had called them the second best team in the East.
Right. I mean, if Giannis, and I hope Giannis comes back, man. I want Giannis to go far. But if he doesn't, and the Heat can somehow beat the Bucks, I think the Knicks and Heat, that's a great series. Classic series. And then we get the winner. We get the winner of the Sixers Celtics. Like, this is cookie scripted for Cookies Hoops.
You know what was also scripted by robots?
Cookies Hoops. Cookies
The
Hoops.
perfect pod. Cookies.
I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies.